there was a philosophy, and I definitely had a philosophy, and I still have it, that it's important that the athlete enjoy what they're doing and see themselves as successful, whether or not it's an absolute achievement of excellence. Like if you're only successful if you go to the Olympics, you're only successful if you win sectionals, those kinds of things. That was never part of my goal setting and interaction with the athletes. It was very much, let's be the very best that you can be for what you're willing to commit. And that's big.
Thanks everybody for joining us on this episode of The Journey. My name is Jeff Commings with my co-host Molly Harmon, and we have another great show for you today.
When you talk about longevity as a coach in swimming, most people think about maybe 5 or 10 years as a coach with one team, but how about 50 years with the same team? And that's what our guest here today has been involved with, the Clayton Shaw Park Swim Team in St. Louis, Missouri. Let's welcome Terry Freerks to the show. Hi, Terry. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Terry, that's absolutely amazing that you've been a part of Clayton Shaw Park for so long. What has been the most compelling reason why you never felt the call to move to another team, as many of your colleagues do?
Well, I think one of the reasons is I got off into coaching, if you will, got started sort of prematurely than what I planned. I was swimming at Arizona State University. I was a sophomore in the middle of my first semester, and I got a call from my parents, and they said, "We don't have any money. You got to come home." So I said, "Ooh, all right." So I packed up my bags and I came back to St. Louis, and I needed a job. So I needed a job and I needed a university because I wanted to matriculate. So I went back to my club team and said, "I've always wanted to coach. I'd helped them out sometimes before." I said, "Can you give me a job and get me going?" And they said, "Sure, come on." So I got started in coaching, put myself through school, and I just put one foot in front of the other, and I was home and I loved it and I was passionate about it. And I think it's fair to say it never crossed my mind to leave. I was working to build something. I had relationships, and I was happy here.
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of people stay at one job for as long as they do. So just to give viewers a little bit of history, I grew up in St. Louis swimming against some of Terry's very best swimmers. And though I was never a Clayton Shaw Park swimmer, I always admired the program from afar, especially because what you fostered there since you became the head coach in 1974. Now, when you were hired as head coach, what designs did you have toward a promotion at the time?
Well, at the time, the team was under the auspices of the city of Clayton. So it was a recreational program. And by the time they allowed me as a female to be the head coach, they were in very dire straits. We had approximately 13 swimmers. I had one, kind of thinking about in the olden days, one A time on the entire squad. And so what really got me hooked and interested was I wanted to build it because I wanted people to have the opportunity to swim. I'm a swimmer. I love swimming. And it was so wonderful to me that I wanted to pass that on. And that was really the philosophy that I started with. It wasn't about winning. It was about inclusion and opportunity to participate.
And when you talk about inclusion, at the time in the mid-1970s, female coaches in swimming, not just female head coaches, were few and far between. How did that inform how you approached the job when you became head coach?
Well, it was interesting because I swam in St. Louis as well growing up, and we were very fortunate because we had a premier female coach in Penny Taylor. And so as a youth, it never occurred to me that there were no women coaches. I mean, I just didn't pay any attention to it. But once I got into the coaching realm and had difficulty assuring my bosses that a female could really do this, then I realized how scarce we were. And so I connected that most of the female coaches when I was working were affiliated with colleges. So I became friends with Cindy Gallagher at UCLA, with Kathy Wingstrom at Northwestern, and we supported one another and went to work. But one of the biggest challenges I had was convincing parents that a woman could coach their swimmer, particularly the parents of male swimmers.
Well, how did that conversation go when you had a parent who was concerned about you being the coach of their swimmer?
Well, what I always tried to do was I tried to drill down and find out what really was their bias. And one time I had a man tell me, it just doesn't look right, Terry. You know, you're 5'6" and you're coaching a man who's, 6'3", and the optics aren't good. And so I would always go back to the fundamentals and say, well, if you can get past the optics, why don't we talk a little bit about experience, what I know, and what I can possibly offer, you're a swimmer. But most importantly, let's talk about the relationship that I have with your athlete. Does he feel good about being here? And parents, are usually pretty good people. And they would say, well, if my child wants to do this, I'm going to support him.
Well, it's very interesting the way you're talking about how you were able to, I guess, convince the parent that their swimmer was right for your team. I mean, it sounds, you sound very much like someone who had studied psychology, which is very true. In the middle of all this coaching that you were doing and growing Clayton Shaw Park, you earned a PhD in counseling psychology. What was it like to juggle the demands of getting a PhD and running a major swim team?
Well, it was actually a very good fit because I was able to take what I learned in the books and apply it to real life. So that was very valuable. What happened was I have an undergraduate degree in history, a master's degree out of the School of Education, but it's really in exercise physiology. And that was a very early time to be studying that. So I went to work when I graduated with my master's at Washington University. And I was prescribing physical activity for patients in order to find out if physical activity enhanced their quality of life and prolonged their quantity of life. And I was really loving it, and it was a wonderful fit for me. But then I lost one of my patients who had become a runner, and I was helping her run, and she was really enjoying it. And she passed away while I was working there, a young gal, early 20s, very close to my age, actually. And I realized, I understand how to train people, but what I really need to understand and look into is what makes them tick and what makes them make the choices they make, and how can I help them with the psychology part. And that was early days as well, because there was so much focus on the physiology. So it worked out very nicely.
Was there a thought that you would need to give up coaching swimming in order to pursue your career in counseling?
No, I never really had that thought. I mean, I've always been a multitasker. So when I graduated with my doctorate, then I went into private practice. And I went into a private practice with two of my professors. And I went to St. Louis University. And so I started fitting it in. So I was able to see clients, if you will, patients, if you will, between workouts, and at odd times I would schedule them. So it was really a nice fit. I was pretty much in charge of my own schedule. So it worked out well. And it was fun.
And so all of these years that I grew up swimming in St. Louis, I'll admit, Terry, I never knew you had this other life as a counselor. I just saw you as this coach on deck. I didn't know it until I was in my mid-20s and someone had said, oh yeah, she's got a PhD. And I was just like, that's absolutely amazing. I mean, every time I saw you, you looked like you were 100% devoted to your swimmers, as most good coaches should be. But, how were you able to juggle these two careers and not really make it look like it was as demanding as it probably was?
Well, it's interesting. Being a swimmer, this, Jeff. In terms of demanding, it's all in your definition. I loved everything I was doing, and I saw how it could complement it. The other thing that it did for me when I got my doctorate was it legitimized me after all these years, and CSP was getting better and better and better, but still that additional piece sort of allowed me not to have the conversations I had had earlier with people who questioned my capability, if you will. So it worked out pretty nicely.
So you talk
And
about,
it was nice to be with very, very healthy people and balance that with people who were struggling. So going to practice, working with kids who were really healthy and well-adjusted, the top 1% of young people, and then seeing young people who were having difficulty, it was a nice compliment. Plus, the other thing I'm thinking as we're talking is when I got into my doctorate and I started doing my clinicals, I was comfortable with families and I was comfortable with people, because in coaching, that's what you're doing. You're interacting with entire systems of people. And a lot of students that I was with in the doctoral program were very nervous about their first patient or seeing the family member or this or that. So it really was nice.
so you talk about legitimizing your credibility and getting all of these awards per se. How did your PhD in psychology help you on the pool deck?
Well, it helped me on the pool deck because it helped me not panic. I learned that change occurs over time and it's not immediate. And I was very patient with building the program and with dealing with athletes. The other, probably more important piece was that I realized that it wasn't about swimming fast and winning events. It was about enjoyment, being holistic, being developmental, being involved with people. I wanted people to have fun and be happy. Not that they weren't working hard, because we worked very hard, but it was a different goal in mind than some of the coaches that I was coaching with in St. Louis at the time. So I think our program was different in that way. And Jeff spoke to that. There was a philosophy, and I definitely had a philosophy, and I still have it, that it's important that the athlete enjoy what they're doing and see themselves as successful, whether or not it's an absolute achievement of excellence. Like if you're only successful if you go to the Olympics, you're only successful if you win sectionals, those kinds of things. That was never part of my goal setting and interaction with the athletes. It was very much, let's be the very best that you can be for what you're willing to commit. And that's big.
Yeah, for sure. So through growing a whole swim team and adding a career in counseling, you've also managed to keep your marriage of 40 years withstand very, very strong. Which many swim coaches will say it's not an easy thing to do. How have you and your husband been able to keep the fire going in your relationship?
Well, he's a swimmer, so that's a huge help. He totally understands, and he totally respected it through all these years. And interestingly enough, my husband graduated from Cornell University. He swam there, and he graduated in a semester. So he went to a job opportunity fair, and the only people there were insurance brokers. And he said, okay, well, I'll try insurance. So he moved to Philadelphia, and he got involved in the insurance field. And he came back to St. Louis to visit his family. We reconnected, and he said, I'm moving back to St. Louis, and I'm going to build my business, and I'm going to live and marry Terry in St. Louis, and she can build her business. So we were partners in that. And he always supported and, shared his difficulties and challenges, and it normalized mine. And hopefully I did the same for him. But we're pretty close. Yeah, we're definitely very best friends and have been forever.
That's awesome.
And we're fortunate and we're grateful about it. And we make sure that we remind each other of that.
That's awesome. I'm sure a lot of people want something like that, and hopefully they find it. It's great that you guys even met as age group swimmers. I believe you guys were 11 and 13 years old, and are kind of remaining active still. What, other than swimming, what other hobbies do you and your husband enjoy?
Well, it's changed over the years. I mean, he's very much an academician as well. He has an MBA in business, and he likes to study that. So we had that in common, and we love to travel. So it was great. It was a nice fit. He's actually the one who got me into master swimming. So I was master swimming while I was working on my doctorate and while I was coaching and building the program. So you can tell he's a multitasker too. So yeah, it's just a really nice fit, and we're 90. I'd say 95% of the time on the same page. We're the couple that is shocked if we see things differently.
Where have you guys traveled to?
Well, we've traveled a lot around the world. We did a fun thing. Probably around 85. I'm not sure, but we went with a master's group out of California, and we swam in meets in Helsinki and Oslo, and Stockholm, and we went to, at the time, was Leningrad. So we were behind the Iron Curtain. And of course, swimming is the universal language. So we had a wonderful time, but we continue to do that. And just recently, we've gotten into visiting national parks with our little passport book. So if you know anything about that, you go to the national park and they stamp it. And then you have a book of all the places that you visited. So we're big USA fans too.
Awesome. Of course, every swimmer who has passed through your swim team, Clayton Shaw Park, is great. And every year, I'm sure there is so many highlights. What is that one moment or even one year that kind of stands out to you as a coach of Clayton Shaw Park?
Honestly, there are quite a few. But if I look at performance, I think having a swimmer be the rookie of the meet at senior nationals, and that was Karen McClure, after she had swum a 200 breaststroke and gotten fourth in finals of the 200 breast. And then one time at senior nationals in Nashville, where our women's 400 medley relay got second. And for a club team, swimming against all the college swimmers and that down in Nashville, that was a highlight. That was lots of fun. We enjoyed it.
I will say I was at that meet in Nashville, and when everybody from St. Louis was just cheering and so excited for that relay, because we were all just like, yes, St. Louis, yes, representing the nationals. That was so much fun. Speaking of some great swimmers, when you stepped away as head coach a few years ago, one of your former swimmers took over as head coach, Dave McCrary. What is it like to have one of your former swimmers now taking over this program as head coach?
It's wonderful because it's like passing the conch shell. He understands what CSP is about. He's a part of it. He is CSP. I've known him. And I think there's a tremendous amount of trust. My hope is that, he feels that I'm a good source for him in order to help and mentor him a little bit as he goes through his career. Not that I think he needs it. I just spent so many years by myself, if you will, not knowing, who could I call, what could I do in order to, reassure me that I was on the right track and doing the right thing. I mean, coaching, as you all know, is extremely demanding and complex. When I was swimming, I thought, oh goodness, I'm going to coach and it's going to be so much easier just standing up there on the deck. But it's not like that. And so it would have been helpful had I had more support. But I will tell you, I was there in 1980 when United States Swimming was founded. And throughout my career, United States Swimming has been a wonderful source of support and advancement for me. They have always been inclusive and helpful. So I'd go to Colorado Springs all the time. I got involved with, running clinics and those kinds of things, but I was learning as I was doing it, and I was able to take it home. So that's been nice.
I think you had some pretty good support there at Clayton Shaw Park. I remember you and that dynamic duo of you and Mary Liston on the deck. You two were kind of like the yin and the yang of coaches, and as you talk about, I mean, you were both female coaches, which to have two coaches on one team be female was a big deal, I think, at the time. And I think I remember a lot of people talking about that was one of the reasons why they wanted to go to Clayton Shaw Park, was to have two female coaches there. What was it like to have Mary by your side all those years?
Well, that was wonderful. That was outstanding. And the thing about Mary is, Mary was working at a YMCA and she was doing great. She's a wonderful coach. And I said, Mary, please come and work with me. And she did. And that is definitely, I mean, there were two really pivotal points. That was one, when Mary came on board. And Mary was definitely, she built the age group program. And she was supportive of me, but she was busy doing her thing with the team. But we were certainly doing it together. And then another turning point was when I hired Hossein Daska, and I hired him to handle the little ones. And so then you could see that we had identities and a curriculum. You started here and you moved to this position and on. And then Mary, of course, did great and moved on and became an elite coach herself. So that was lovely.
Yeah, it's just a great history of, I mean, we could go on and talk about all these names that have gone through the cycle at Clayton Shaw Park, not just swimmers, but coaches. And you've been that mainstay through all these years. I mean, you're still now executive director, so you're still very involved. Is there something, if you could look forward 5 years into the future, that you would like to see happen with Clayton Shaw Park?
Well, I think it's a combination. I think modernizing, and certainly that's happened under Dave. He's very current and very involved with training. But I also want to see the tradition continue, that it's a place where people feel safe and comfortable and connected. And again, sort of getting back to, a sense of happiness. So when they look back on their swimming, whether they continue with it or not, they feel good about it. And of course, now with my age, I have generations. I have my swimmers' children, and I don't know if I should admit this, but it's starting to get to where I'm going to have their children's children coming in the program. And that makes me feel good because it's a wonderful contribution. I want it to continue and be healthy.
Right. Make those generations keep coming back to Clayton Shaw Park, because obviously you've done some good that they keep bringing their kids in.
I like to think that.
Well, Terry, it's been so great catching up with you. It's been so long since I've seen you. I'm so glad that you're continuing to be involved in the sport, and thank you so much for all your contributions. I know I speak for a lot of the swimmers that you've coached through the years, and say just thank you for being a part of the sport. It would be a much different swimming community in St. Louis without you.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. And you've been an important part of swimming in St. Louis, too. So congratulations. And Molly, nice to meet you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on the journey. We hope you learned something with our conversation with Terry Freerks. And we'll see you next time. And remember, it's not just about the destination. It's also about the journey.